Good afternoon, everyone. I'm really thrilled to be with you, Madeleine Rees, because, if there's anyone which embodies courage, it is you. So Madeleine, you've dedicated your life to fight for human rights and women's rights in particular. In the UK, you were a leading discrimination law leader, and you extended your skills to the international sphere, working for the UN, operating in conflict zones such as Bosnia. You've also, as was said before us, the former Secretary General of the Women International League for Peace and Freedom, which is a non-profit, non-governmental feminist organization which was founded in 1915. So both in your personal and professional life, you face many challenges that demanded courage. Courage to stand up against injustice, courage to disobey, and go against the status quo or the established order. So, very simple question. What is courage to you?
Thank you, and thank you for that very warm welcome and introduction. It makes me feel very old, having dedicated my life to all this. And I want to try and raise like 4 decades of experience plus in just 10 minutes. But what does it mean to me? What does courage mean to me? It's everything that you just said, Veronique. And when I was trying to think what I would tell you, the most important of all of them, I think, is that everywhere I have worked, in multiple countries, in multiple different situations, not one woman has ever come to me and said that she was embellishing courage. Nobody identified what they were doing as courageous, even though to me it was amazing. I even had one woman come to a meeting on Syria who was living under ISIS. She came to our meeting. At the end of the meeting, she turned around and she went back. That to me is an embodiment of courage, but she didn't think she was being courageous. And this is what women do. It is about resilience and just doing what you can when you have to do it, in whatever circumstances you are in. So that is what courage is. It's having the audacity to continue.
Yeah, and take the risk. So during your career, you've witnessed extreme violence, especially sex trafficking in Bosnia, which is very well described, and I encourage you to see the movie if you haven't seen it, The Whistleblower, which talks about the implication of UN officers in that traffic, and which also saw the strengths and the resilience of women on the ground, determined to overcome and to rebuild a future. So resilience is another face of courage.
Absolutely. And just very quickly, because we haven't got much time, I want to just refer to some of the situations that I've seen where issues have arisen which we need to deal with now, because the one thing that's so fundamentally is important, that as we go forward, we learn. We learn from what happened with peacekeepers and trafficking. We learn what we have to do. In Argentina, when I was there, women were living under the generals, and they were working on domestic violence, building law, making changes, despite the fact that they were at huge risk because of the military dictatorship. And they were even going further in translating what they were learning from those domestic situations into an understanding of how that transposes into militarism. And then in Nicaragua, several years later, different form of resilience, amazing women who were part of the Sandinista resistance. They had picked up arms and they had actually worked to try to remove the dictatorship from the Somoza regime. And then at the end of it, what was happening? They were subjected to incredible violence. And they said to me that they had this dream of international law. We needed international law to reflect what it is that women experience so that we can have an international solidarity. So they sent me off to become one, which eventually I did. And then in Bosnia, learning those lessons of social reproduction, political economy, the necessity of having those together, of resisting militarism as a way of thought, and changing the narrative. In Bosnia, women's organizations from Germany came and set up rape crisis centers with women from Bosnia, helped by women from Croatia and women from Serbia, changing the narratives of ancient tribal hatreds, but showing us the importance of ensuring the context in which you live informs what happens next. You can't go and testify with Amal in The Hague if you haven't got access to education, to healthcare, you don't know where your partner is, you don't know where you're going to live, you've got to provide all of those. These we learned, and we have to dovetail those into our legal frameworks so that we can actually have a concurrent way of getting justice. And the other thing they learned with the trafficking was follow the money. Because the work that we were doing to help and support women in the transition was diverted because money came in to deal as sticking plaster with trafficking. So they had to stop doing the incredible work they were doing to try and rebuild Bosnia and focus on assisting and supporting women who needed their help. Despite the incredible danger that local people were in, we weren't. You know, we could lose our jobs, yeah, but big deal. That's nothing compared to what could happen to them. They risked it to do it, to show solidarity and to build that support.
So you were talking about sharing experiences. It's very key. I mean, learning from other women to foster courage and resilience. And you organized recently, I think, meetings where all those women who have been victims are gathering. What happened in those meetings? How do you help them?
You bring a bunch of women together and you've got change. One of the things that we did in WILPF was we realized the lived experiences from women in Bosnia would help the women from Ukraine, and the women from Syria could work with the women from Bosnia to learn from their experiences. And over time, what we did, we started building this connection of convenings so that women could share and learn from each other their experiences. And you know what? They were the same. Contextually variable, yes, of course, but actually the same. Women were all involving in this social reproduction, holding communities together, defying those who would prevent them, and continuing to work towards building peace. And one of the things I think is absolutely crucial is that whilst we were doing this work across countries, the nationalisms folded, and that solidarity was there. And that I can't emphasize enough, is that they don't see themselves as courageous because they are together. And they worked together. And of course they've got brilliant leaders amongst them, of course they have. And we do hope there will be a feminist Prime Minister of Afghanistan one day in Fawzia Koofi, who is still working and resilient against all the odds. But we have got to give them the sort of support that's needed, and one of those is through finance. And I think, if you want to just dovetail now into what we can do next.
Yeah, I mean, in recent years, there's been a pushback, against a gender approach, and you've been advocating for years for a peace building with a feminist lens. What makes you hopeful still, and how do we foster change today in that context?
That's a great question, because I think that one of the things that's come from all the convenings that we've done and all this work everywhere is we are now much better at understanding what we need to do. And that's come out, I think, even from the conference here today already, where you bring art into the mix and what you have to do. So from us, if you think, we now know we need to value social reproduction, it is not valued. In the UK alone, I think it's £3 trillion worth of work is done in the care community, not entering the GDP at all because women mainly do it. 3 trillion. Elon Musk is about to get a 1 million share deal. Excuse me, what are we valuing here? If we valued our social reproduction, our healthcare, our education, the things which hold us all together, if we valued that the same way as we valued our militarized security and our corporate profits, we would be having different conversations about violence against women and about peace. And I invite everybody who is here, who's working in the corporate sphere, to think about how we can now reframe that valuing so that the profits from capitalism is actually put into what we need to sustain peace and indeed save the planet, of course. But another part, I think a really fundamental part of that is joining it all together. If we see law, and Amal was saying that this morning, and I think law has been a very strong thread through all of this. Law cannot change everything on its own, but it's a thread around which we build an architecture. And it's an architecture built on those understandings of the elements that make up our communities, our cultures, our societies, hence the importance of art. And if we bring the financial mechanisms into that and we construct something together, which is not individualistic, but is collective, then I think that we have huge possibilities of retaining the gains that we have made and fought so hard for over the last 40 plus years. So I hope we will be able to do that.
Thank you very much, Madeleine, and perfect timing as well. 10 minutes is too short, but we said a couple stuff. Thank you very much.